you by Pfizer.
In this video, you're going to see the future.
Hello there, you Awakening Wonders. Thanks for joining me today for Stay Free with Russell Brand, where once again we undertake the impossible and implausible task of trying to report to you on global events when they move at this pace. Look, this is just like since we were last on Wednesday, Thursday's show was pre-taped. This is what's happened. Trump says Ukraine can forget about joining NATO. Zelensky leaves White House after stunning shouting match with Trump. Israel blocks entry of all humanitarian aid into Gaza. European leaders voice support for Zelensky following heated exchange with Trump. Starmer pledges British boots on the ground to secure peace in Ukraine. Rubio signs declaration to expedite delivery of $4 billion in military aid to Israel. I mean, look down there in the corner, barely worthy of mention. US releases $870 million in military aid for Taiwan. It's actually difficult. The King of England meets with Zelensky after that extraordinary and exciting White House meeting. That I actually feel like, how do you lot feel? Do you feel like it's now an impossible task and endeavour to try to keep up with current events? Like we're literally undertaking something that's simultaneously Sisyphean, pushing a boulder up a hill, knowing that it's going to roll down again, and Promethean, like just having your guts pecked out for all eternity. Were it not for the sacrifice of the Holy One, then that would be the answer, because what supersedes pagan beliefs is the idea that by his blood we may be saved. Don't you sometimes sense in the Gideon cycle of the news that material things, political things aren't going to bring about resolution? That in your own life, perhaps what you're offering yourself as a salve is not salvation, but just continually anesthetizing yourself and distracting yourself from how overwhelming this is. Let me know how you feel over on Locals, you beloved, glorious Awakened Wonders and supporters of our cause. Let me know if you haven't got Rumble Premium yet, if you're planning to get Rumble Premium, where you'll get additional content from us. I'm looking at the Rumble chat. I'm looking at Social Blend and McCrum and you guys. Yeah, what can King Chuck do? I don't know really what Charles III can do other than normalise the idea of continuing aggression between Ukraine and Russia. That was an extraordinary event, the J.D. Vance, Trump, Zelensky moment. One of my favourite memes was me asking my nan if we can go to McDonald's. Me asking my mum if we can go to McDonald's. That meme was pretty good. Whether you're watching us on X or on YouTube, ultimately our home is Rumble, and we hope that you will join us there soon enough. This just in, English is the preferred and indeed official language of the United States, and the handgun the official firearm. On one hand you think that's so obvious as to not need stating, but how do you see that kind of executive order? Do you see that as part of the nationalism of the Trump MAGA movement? English is our language, there's two genders. It's in a sense an assertion of conservative values, and whether you agree with those values or not, one thing that I'd like to continue to reiterate is you cannot question that Trump campaigned on what he is now doing, except perhaps on subjects like the Epstein list. When are we getting our Epstein list? Epstein list. And let me know in the comments and chat why you think we're not getting the Epstein list. We'll be looking at that, as well as Andrew Tate's arrival in Florida. We'll be looking too at the ongoing separation between Europe's position on the Ukraine-Russia conflict and America's position on the Ukraine-Russia conflict, not to mention the trade war with Canada. Hey, the mainstream media may be slow, but it gets there eventually. Jake Tapper acknowledges in his book Original Sin, that's such a grandiose title, that Joe Biden was mentally ill. Look at this. Look at that sort of subtitle. President Biden's decline, its cover-up, and his disastrous choice to run again. Isn't that extraordinary? Because, who was it that led us to believe that Joe Biden was cognitively adept. Do you not remember, for example, Joe Scarborough of Morning Joe going, I think he's sharper than he's ever been. I actually, this morning, I was examining Joe Biden's penis, and it was as taut and as velvety, as purple and as proud as a 20-year-old boy's penis. Like, people were making outrageous claims about the virility of Joe Biden when common sense was telling you that he was falling apart. People were making outrageous claims about the efficacy of ventilators when common sense was telling you that ventilating patients with respiratory conditions could lead to overexpansion of their lungs. People were claiming that the vaccines were safe when common sense would tell you they hadn't had time to trial them correctly. People were telling you that Russia had to be beat down and defeated when common sense was telling you that Russia is a nuclear superpower, and if you continue to provoke them, whatever your moral position is, it's likely to lead to more and more deaths of Ukrainians and Russians, and potentially now, with Britain's new posturing, British folk, people all around the world. What I'm telling you is that your common sense, and for common sense to exist, there have to be universal truths. And for there to be universal truths, there has to be an absolute truth. And for there to be an absolute truth, does there have to be an absolute creator? I'd say yes. Maybe you'd say no. Let me know in the comments and chat what you think about that. But certainly what we can all agree on is we're moving into an era where we can no longer trust the legacy media. Presumably that would include Jake Tapper. I know people like David Icke would say that even independent media is now sort of going out to bat for Trump so enthusiastically that they amount to now a cheerleading squad for the MAGA movement. But I would say that our function here is ongoing, objective for an independent assessment as best as we can achieve with our own biases. And one way to do that, I would say, is acknowledging those biases and recognizing that if we're going to have a position on anything at all, then we have to believe in something. We can't 1 minute claim that Joe Biden is as sharp as a tack and the next minute write a book about Joe Biden's cognitive decline and how he shouldn't have stood for a second time, Jake Tapper. That's absolutely outrageous. We've got so much more to cover. Here is Jake Tapper, by the way, during Biden's presidency, criticizing Lara Trump for daring to claim that Biden was anything other than a sort of a living Sudoku of mental acuity.
How do you think it makes little kids with stutters feel when they see you make a comment like that?
First and foremost,
the main news again, little kids with stutters. You see that the sort of weird tangential avenues that the legacy media will go down in order to justify its moral posturing. Of course, a little kid with a stutter is a sad thing, and they should have vocal coaches and speech lessons. But you can't use little kids with stutters to legitimize censorship, which I bet is where he's going with this.
I had no idea that Joe Biden ever suffered from a stutter. I think what we see on stage with Joe Biden, Jake, is very clearly a cognitive decline.
Okay.
That's what I'm referring to. It makes me uncomfortable.
You are.
Okay, that's it. You've gone too far. You've suggested cognitive decline. Let's have a look at his book again. What's his book called? Let me just see that. Look, Original Sin, President Joe Biden's Decline, its cover-up and his disastrous choice to run again. Now, you might think that's a while ago, but the same legacy media outlets are right now pushing the same biased and warped perspective on reality that they were pushing then. In a way, you can look back at the pandemic, and I reckon a good tool for discernment will be, what were these people stroke platforms telling us during the pandemic? Joe Rogan, what was he saying during the pandemic? Piers Morgan, what was he saying during the pandemic? Me, CNN, MSNBC, Fox. You could choose anyone, and you can use it as a kind of litmus test of their reliability. Is what were they saying during the pandemic? What are they saying now during this war? We'll be covering that war both from an American perspective and a European perspective in a few minutes. I can't believe how fast things are moving. It's absolutely astonishing. Maybe we'll be covering later the possibility that the US may leave NATO. Now, like the NATO without the United States of America is a sort of a hollow and empty vessel, and many people would argue that that's what it is anyway, other than its capacity to provoke Putin and presumably facilitate military industrial complex agenda and objectives. We're going to cover now, you lot, the Canada trade war, because astonishing though it is, the Zelensky, JD Vance, Trump White House meeting of last week is already sort of fading into history. I don't know how you and I are meant to keep up with the rate of change. In fact, it's impossible to without recourse to eternity. You have to have a set of values that are tethered to and expressions of something outside of time that contains time. If you're living in temporality, taking your moral positions, your satisfaction, and even your disappointments from this rapid and tumultuous culture, no wonder you feel despairing and afraid, because the world moves fast. We're going to be with you if you're on X or if you're on YouTube for a little while longer, but ultimately we'll be on exclusively on our home Rumble and eventually on Rumble Prime. This is where I do my show Break Bread. Here's my conversation with Sean Foyt, outspoken conservative pastor. He's the participant in this week's Break Bread with Russell Brand, which you get if you become a subscriber of Rumble Premium. Here's Sean Foyt making this claim, and let me know if you agree with him, that the United States of America is a Christian nation. Trump has just told us that English is the official language of the United States. Is Christianity the official religion of the United States? Let me know what you think about that in the comments and chat, or does secularism forebode such a claim? Let's have a look at Sean Foyt on Break Bread. You get this if you subscribe to Rumble Premium. You can do that now. Use our code to get a discount.
I feel like it's time for us to just start repeating what many of the founding fathers have said. America is a Christian nation. Fact. Okay? It doesn't mean that you can't be of another faith and live here, right? It doesn't mean that you can't be a Muslim or a Hindu or Buddhist or agnostic or whatever. But this nation is a Christian nation. And there are Muslim nations and there are Hindu nations and there are Buddhist nations. But when you come to America, we're a Christian nation, right? And I don't know why that's such a difficult thing for people to realize.
Okay, so Trump has announced a 25% tariff on both Canada and Mexico. Now, let's cast our minds way back just, a couple of months basically to the height of the pandemic. How did Canada behave during that pandemic? Were they the most liberal nation on earth? Or did they evoke emergency measures? Did they freeze bank accounts of dissenters? And did I dream it? Or did they invite a literal Nazi into the Canadian Parliament to be applauded? Let me know in the comments and chat what you think about that. And let me know what the new discourse between Canada and America tells us about the stability of the planet. With Canadian politicians saying, we're going to get nuclear armed. That's the extraordinarily named Chrystia Freeland, who I believe has at least one Nazi grandparent, claiming that Canada needs to be forearmed in order to be forewarned against potential conflict with the United States of America. What kind of world are we living in now? And in the event of a nuclear war, whose side do you want to be on? First of all, let's have a look at Trump's announcement that there will be a 25% tariff on trade between Canada and Mexico and the United States, before looking at, this new Canadian nationalism and their claim that they're going to arm themselves with a nuclear capacity. Pretty astonishing.
But very importantly, tomorrow tariffs 25% on Canada and 25% on Mexico, and that'll start. So they're going to have a tariff. So what they have to do is build their car plants, frankly, and other things in the United States, in which case they have no tariffs. In other words, you build, and this is exactly what Mr. Wei is doing, by building here. Otherwise, they'll build, if they did them in Taiwan to send them here, they'll have 25% or 30% or 50% or whatever the number may be someday. It'll go only up. But by doing it here, he has no tariff, so he's way ahead of the game. And I would just say this to...
Yeah, well, if you tariff us, we will cut off your electricity. That's what Ontario Premier Doug Ford has said in response to Trump's tariffs. Let's have a look at that.
If they want to try to annihilate Ontario, I will do everything, including cut off their energy, with a smile on my face. So, and I'm encouraging every other province to do this.
Now, it's not just Trump and J.D. Vance that engage in rhetoric and outspoken posturing. You can see that other political figures that make claims of rationalism and reason and that are part of the same establishment that decry Trump as a kind of bizarre and berserk outlier, they posture too. Remember Joe Biden saying, that we were, do you remember when we were talking about the Nord Stream pipeline, Joe Biden going, yeah, listen, they won't cross us. That, in a sense, I would say this: the more mean, mealy-mouthed and mediocre political figures also engage in grandstanding, but it's just less impressive when they do it. He continues, Doug Ford, to claim that not only will they cut off America's energy, but that also they're not ruling out fighting to the death, before sort of backtracking somewhat ridiculously.
The same, Quebec, Manitoba, BC, we all have to act in unison. Out east, they rely on our energy, they need to feel the pain. They want to come at us hard, we're going to come back twice as hard.
In a way, global politics now resembles wrestling. Weird discourse, extraordinary caricatures, public spats. How long before Zelensky gets hit over the head with a folding chair? How long before these bizarre Vince McMahon-style narratives become impossible to track? I don't know how you feel about occupying this untenable and bewildering blizzard of unmanageable reality. Like, I feel that in order to even chart a way through it, you have to have some sense of a deeper, ulterior meaning. You have to have some sort of sense of a framing beyond time, because this kind of ongoing bewilderment is... it's not what you were made for. It's not what you were created for. Here, Doug Ford, who just says he's going to cut off American energy supply with a smile on his face, engaging in exactly the kind of discourse that's condemned in liberal media. Like, that's what they say. You can't have someone like Trump grandstanding like that. And then, but you see, more mediocre and less pronounced political figures try to do the same thing, just less well. So even the position from which they condemn Trump is unstable, because they would do all of it and any of it themselves. They're just less good at it.
You know, to the president, I'm a different type of cat. I'll fight tooth and nail. I'm not going to roll over and get annihilated. I'll fight right to the death. Not that there's going to be any deaths.
No, when I say fight to the death, I don't mean death. I mean a kind of abstract kind of death, a kind of, as it were, a kind of ennui, a despair. I'll fight till people are disappointed.
But, you know, the economy, I will go on. He has no idea. He has absolutely no idea.
It seems slightly absurd to you, as sort of a local Ontario politician claiming that they will fight to the death with the President of the United States. Are you struggling now to believe in their reality? Here, Chrystia Freeland makes claims for moral superiority, the same claims that she and Trudeau made during the pandemic, that the measures and acts that they were undertaken were underwritten by the pursuit of, the preservation of life, the protection of Canadians, that the truckers were Nazis, that we had to freeze those bank accounts. It just doesn't hold together anymore. Here, Chrystia Freeland says that Canada are going to develop a nuclear deterrent. Now, Chrystia Freeland is exactly the kind of WEF-trained globalist politician that I, and I reckon you too, believe are a greater threat than populist nationalist politicians, and are the reason that nationalist politicians are enjoying success, because they are connected to their population. They're connected to the kind of feeling and sentiment of the times. People wanting to feel that they live in a country, that there are traditions and values that make sense amidst the bewilderment of globalism that seems to exist only to facilitate centralizing global interests. Here, Chrystia Freeland, again, a person coming from an apparent position of moral superiority, saying that Canada are going to develop a nuclear deterrent. It's really odd.
The U.S. is turning predator. And so what Canada needs to do is work closely with our democratic allies, our military allies. I've been foreign minister. I know how to do that. That's why I would start with our Nordic partners, specifically Denmark, which is also being...
saying this because she's running to be Prime Minister to replace Justin Trudeau, who's been castrated for some time now. In fact, in some ways, it's a kind of living metaphor for castration. And the fact that these kind of globalist leaders have no real power. They have only the power their role affords them. And that is to be ciphers for a globalist agenda. Chrystia Freeland, again, posturing, we're going to make Canada a nuclear power. We're going to team up with Denmark. Now, no disrespect to Denmark, but the Viking days are over, baby.
So being threatened and our European NATO allies, I would be sure that France and Britain were there who possess nuclear weapons. And I would be working urgently with those partners to build a closer security relationship that guarantees our security in a time when the United States can be a
Okay, so new alliances will be forged in order to oppose the United States of America. But the basis for that opposition is dubious because some of us have got memories and can recall that Chrystia Freeland and Justin Trudeau during the pandemic froze the bank accounts and rights of ordinary Canadians. Let me know if you remember those trucker protests and how those truckers were treated, condemned and damned. It's extraordinary to hear that citizens of a country can be called Nazis seemingly indiscriminately, while we are ourselves invited to spend our own tax dollars and pounds and whatever is the relevant currency supporting the Ukraine's efforts against Russia, which includes the not insignificant Azov battalion that are literal Nazis, and Chrystia Freeland's grandfather, who was an actual Nazi, and that dude that turned up in the Canadian Parliament that was an actual Nazi. Now, we don't need to get overwhelmed by Nazism, but we do need to acknowledge the extraordinary hypocrisy at the heart of their movement and their ongoing inability and unwillingness to take that simple mea culpa and say, we made mistakes during the pandemic, we might be making mistakes right now. It's no wonder we've lost the support of the electorate. It's no wonder that no one believes in what we're selling or wants to purchase what's on offer from us anymore, because we've behaved appallingly in the last few years. If we claimed to be wearing the mantle of the great leaders of the 60s, the civil rights martyrs like Martin Luther King, like Malcolm X, like the female suffrage movement, it's a claim that seems increasingly ridiculous when you know that the beneficiaries of our political movement are always global bureaucracies that are unelected and profiteering global corporations. And that's why the Ukraine-Russia conflict has become so significant as the lens that enables us to continue to see, as the pandemic did, that there is a force behind apparent humanitarianism, behind apparent wokeism that is pretty dark, actually. Chrystia Freeland, her name is sarcastic. Her attempt to become leader of Canada probably will succeed, actually. But the idea that liberalism and these kind of globalist politicians have high ground, a moral high ground or moral authority over nationalist leaders, notably Trump, is outrageous and ridiculous. And we're seeing that unfold now in real time. But that's just what I think. Let me know what you think in the comments and chat. Remember, we're here every day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and we provide additional content on Rumble Premium. Subscribe to that now in order to get additional content from us, other great Rumble creators, the ones that aren't being asked to form government now, extraordinarily, as well as shows like Break Bread. We've got a quick message now from one of our partners. We're going to be back in a minute talking about Tate in Florida, talking about Keir Starmer saying boots on the ground and planes in the air. We're going to be talking about Elon Musk's appearance on Joe Rogan and so much more. So stay with us and eventually join us on Rumble. But here's a quick message. Are you a yo-yo dieter? You lose weight, you gain the weight back again, you hate yourself, you be sick, you're standing in front of the mirror, you're crying, you're screaming the names of the Lord into a broken mirror. That's got to stop. It's time for you to try lean instead of that weird serial killer thing you were doing just before. It's dangerous to be a yo-yo dieter. Studies show that you can increase the risk of heart attack, stroke, type 2 diabetes, and other health problems. Breaking free of your yo-yo diet pattern is the main reason doctors created lean. Lean is a supplement, not an injection, and you don't need a prescription. It's not like that crazy thing, Ozempic or whatever it's called. The science behind lean is impressive. It's studied natural ingredients target weight loss in 3 powerful ways. Powerful way 1 helps maintain healthy blood sugar. Powerful way 2 helps control appetite and cravings. Powerful way 3, it helps burn fat by converting it into energy. That's 3. powerful ways. Listen, if you're tired of losing weight, then just gaining that weight back again, if you want to lose meaningful weight at a healthy pace, Lean was created for you. Let me get you started by offering you 20% off when you offer brand20 at takelean.com. That's code brand20 at takelean.com. Thank you. Yeah, get it. Why don't you? Like, where are the Epstein files? Who's on that Epstein list? Why is it not arriving? We'll be talking about that a little later. But first, we're going to talk about the extraordinary week in war that we've just gone through. You saw that list of headlines. This is just since the last show. Like, globally, extraordinary activity, whether it's China and Taiwan, Israel, or of course, Ukraine and Russia. It's been a time of extraordinary developments. But where we are now is Trump has paused all military aid to Ukraine after that extraordinary theatrical, and let's face it, fucking brilliant meeting at the White House. I mean, it was good, wasn't it? I mean, at least politics now is entertaining since it's all turned into a sort of bizarre global wrestling foundation. But what does this mean for the people of Ukraine? What does it mean for your tax dollars? What does it mean for British kids that might be asked to fight in a war against Russia right now, as if it's like not for 1914, we were on the same side as Russia then, or by 1917. In any event, we are back in a time of global conflict that's very difficult to trace, track, and keep up with. Let's do our best to understand what's happening just the last week when it comes to Ukraine and US. And is there a way back for Zelensky? Let me know in the comments and chat. Should Zelensky just go, I overreacted in that White House meeting, sorry about that, guys? Or should Zelensky stick to his guns? And is he going to have guns anymore now that the United States are officially not providing him with any? Let's have a look.
Reporting the United States is pausing all U.S. military aid to Ukraine until President Trump determines the Ukrainians show a commitment of good faith peace negotiations. That's according to a senior Trump administration telling Fox. This is not a permanent termination of aid. It is a pause. The orders are going out right now. The official said this in response to Ukrainian President Zelensky's conduct over the last week and his words over the weekend. So it's all stopping, Brian.
Yeah, well, he needs an apology. President Trump says, I need a direct apology. This can be fixed with a phone call. Sorry if things went off the rails. Like the first 45 minutes of our talk. Didn't
Zelensky do that? Let me know in the comments and chat if you think that Zelensky should just say, sorry about that, I overreacted. Because what this is like, in a way, is when a movie franchise makes a first movie, like, I don't know, one of them new Star Wars, and then a new director takes over for the sequel who has a different vision for the franchise. Remember when Luke Skywalker threw that lightsaber away? He would never do that. It was his phallus. It was his weapon. It was his crucifix. It was his connection to divine power. The last administration it was convenient for Zelensky to be seen as a patriotic hero representing the interests of the Ukrainian people and standing up in a David versus Goliath way against the oppressor and aggressor, Putin. That role has been suspended. Zelensky now is required to be contrite and to be open to reconciliation and peace with Putin, which ultimately has to happen if you don't want to see more Ukrainians die, more Russians die, British people, American people, depending on what configuration of perpetuating war we are being invited to participate in. What I reckon can operate as a kind of anchor is remembering aphorisms and phrases that just make common sense and are actually quite recent. I ain't talking scripture here. When Julian Assange said of Afghanistan, the goal was not to end the war but to perpetuate it, and that the function of government is to take your money and to put it in the hands of private individuals, private corporations. That makes sense. Like when Elon Musk posts the Ukraine war is basically a money laundering operation, doesn't that make sense to you? I'm not making that claim from the perspective or to the ends and impact on Ukrainian people, for whom it's obviously a humanitarian disaster and total nightmare. I'm saying that ultimately, when it comes to NATO and BlackRock and the World Bank and that nexus of global interests that are somehow able to traverse and hold and frame this globe while being accountable, and none of us, it's a money laundering operation. Later, we'll be talking about Musk's appearance on Joe Rogan and his description and definition of Soros's genius, that George Soros is a kind of representative of that global class of individuals like Bill Gates who are able to sort of navigate these spaces expertly and brilliantly. What Trump is antithetical to that kind of power. I do think he's in some ways an atavistic throwback, but also he's the very vanguard of contemporary politics, able to have discourse in a way that sort of seems sort of familiar and folky and kind of like the necessary catharsis after all these years of bullshit and jargon and behind closed doors maneuvering, when we all sensed, this is about energy, this is about minerals, the Iraq war was about oil, Afghanistan was botched, Vietnam was a lie. Now these things are happening publicly, and whilst I would say, where's the Epstein bloody lists, in the main Trump is governing in the way he campaigned, and that these days is a pretty high bar, certainly a threshold the Democrat Party couldn't reach to. Okay, let's have a look at Trump's reaction to Zelensky claiming that the end of the war is far away, which kind of understandably irritates him, because Zelensky, by any reckoning, is a kind of puppet. He's a Ukrainian celebrity that rose to political prominence. That don't mean that he don't have no authority. It just means that in all likelihood, Zelensky has to choose between being an expression of the power of true Russian authority or being an expression of the power of NATO authority. Ukraine, like Britain, actually, are ultimately a subsidiary nation. Whilst English may be the official language of the United States of America, the language belongs to the Americans now. The days of the British Empire are over. Its colonialism has passed. American empire is on some sort of precipitous point. We all know that. But what's just happened as a result of the last election is sovereignty has been snatched back from globalists. Zelensky is a character from a franchise that's lost its director. He's the Jar Jar Binks of global politics.
President Zelensky supposedly made a statement today in AP. I'm not a big fan of AP, so maybe it was an incorrect statement, but he said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time. And he better not be right about that. That's all I'm saying.
All my liberal friends saw that Zelensky, Trump and J.D. Vance spat of evidence of Trump's megalomania. But I see it as a kind of advance in political discourse, that now these things are happening, as I said, in a kind of WWF way, like it's bizarrely expressionistic and somehow oddly archetypal, unlike the insidious and deceptive political discourse of the preceding years. You knew during the pandemic you were being lied to. You knew that vaccine was probably doing more harm than good, that the measures were made up on the spot. Wear a mask 6 feet apart. And then you noticed as we escalated or almost transitioned from the pandemic into the Ukraine-Russia conflict that the same tropes were at play. Remember that meme of Indiana Jones replacing the magical Philosopher's Stone artifact with a bag of sand when we were invited to start thinking about Ukraine and Russia as the new humanitarian cause that we all had to invest in? What's happened is that bubble has popped now, but figures like Chrystia Freeland, Keir Starmer, and Kamala Harris, who looks like a spectre when you see her haunting California much too late after the smouldering flames that she still claims to be able to smell, they're trying to keep alive discourse that's dead now. And most Americans believe that Trump will do a better job of bringing about peace than Biden or Kamala Harris or whatever stooge they stick out there ever would have done. Let me know in the comments and chat if you agree with that, and let me know, what is the aim here? Can you ever zoom back and get a 50-mile high perspective on this and think, well, what's best for Ukrainian people, Russian people, and for the world at large? It's obviously for some sort of ceasefire and some sort of peace deal, isn't it? I mean, who's going to argue with that? I'll tell you who. You're going to argue with it if you're British, because you might get conscripted. We'll be covering that in a minute, but let's for a minute look at Trump's unique, admittedly brash, some might say vulgar, handling of this situation that may yet lead to peace.
So I think the easiest way we can kind of just ask this is, do Americans like the way that Trump's handling his job and compare it to how they felt about Joe Biden? So this is the net approval rating. You look at Joe Biden back in 2024, he was 22 points underwater. Holy cow. You look at Donald Trump, it's just a different planet entirely. I mean, the gulf between these two is wider than the Gulf of America or Mexico, depending on which side of the aisle you stand on. He's at +2. So look, at this particular point, Americans are giving Donald Trump the benefit of the doubt. He's doing considerably better than Joe Biden was doing on the handling of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. And so on this simple question, I think Americans are saying, okay, Donald Trump's doing all right on this.
What about specifically on how they feel about bringing the war to an end?
Yeah, okay. So, look, questions on this can be quite complicated, but I think this kind of gets at sort of where the American trend line is. Americans on the Russia-Ukraine war want a quicker end of the war, but Russia keeps its captured land. Look at this, 50%. Bare majority coming in here. Support Ukraine's right to fight, even if it means a longer war. That's at 48. This is
one person who definitely benefits from a perpetuated war is Zelensky, who probably senses that when the war ends, his authority and power ends with it. You need no more stark and obvious image than Zelensky standing alongside King Charles III of the United Kingdom to understand that what we're talking about is a shift in sovereignty, old school power versus new populist power. I reckon it's pretty clear that Zelensky remains affiliated with the type of powers that had authority prior to Trump's landslide victory. It seems that Zelensky, in spite of all the evidence to the contrary, if you were to consider it simply from the perspective of preserving Ukrainian territory and Ukrainian lives, benefits from this war continuing. Certainly, he's a participant when it comes to any negotiations for a peace deal. What is his position? And is he, as Trump said, tangoing his way into perpetuating this conflict?
Russia says that your administration's foreign policy is, quote, largely in line with their vision.
Well, I'll tell you what, I think it takes two to tango, and you're going to have to make a deal with Russia, and you're going to have to make a deal with Ukraine. You're going to have the assent, and you're going to have the consent from the European nations, because I think that's important, and from us. I think everybody has to get into a room, so to speak, and we have to make a deal. And the deal can be made very fast. It should not be that hard a deal to make. It can be made very fast. Now, maybe somebody doesn't want to make a deal. And if somebody doesn't want to make a deal, I think that person won't be around very long. That person will not be listened to very long because I believe that Russia wants to make a deal. I believe certainly the people of Ukraine want to make a deal. They've suffered more than anybody else. We talk about suffering. They've suffered.
Even if you hate Donald Trump, you should see Trump's ascendancy as good for electoral democracy, because what Trump is demonstrating is that mandate matters. That if someone is elected and says, I'm going to end the Ukraine-Russia conflict, there's no reason why American taxpayers should fund this ongoing and unwinnable conflict when we suspect that much of the aid is finding its way into the wrong hands. You could be a socialist. You could be someone who believes in views that are antithetical and opposite to Trump's, but you should be heartened by the idea that a mandate can take someone to power who's going to then govern in alignment with his campaigning. Let me know what you think about that potentially controversial view, because I would say that it's, in a sense, if you're a person who admires the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and believes actually in the possibility of democracy and a kind of adaptive systems of government, because that's what the United States was. It adapted and grew out of the monarchies of Europe and became an expression of classical democracy that was unprecedented and unimagined until it was achieved by the forefathers of your great nation. Now, you might disagree with the inflections of Trump, the tan and hue of Trump, but it's, I think, impressive to see somebody govern in alignment with their campaigning. I think it's impressive to see someone in a White House meeting just say, you're not in a position to tell us that. Don't tell us how to feel. Why have you not said thank you? Like, for a while, it's like the intelligentsia had captured through elitism the political process. That politics is meant to be something you don't understand. Politics is nothing to do with you if you're in Nebraska or North Yorkshire. Politics is for us, for the elite, for the metropoles, for the cosmopolitans. We'll tell you what to think. think and what to do, and they still want to tell you what to think and what to do through censorship. Populism is the future. Populism is unstoppable. Now that we have access to these means of communication, the only way they can prevent more populist uprisings, likely initially nationalistic, but they could be Christian, Muslim. I mean, in fact, it could be expressed in myriad ways. But what can't happen anymore is centralized globalist control. Not when you've got controversial, publicly competent figures like Trump, and there will be others. There will be more. There will be a British Trump. There will be, I would say, every nation in the world potentially now could create its own populist movement off the back of this. Globalism was an understandable response to the wars of the 20th century. That was a good way of ensuring peace in Europe. But globalism became captured and co-opted, and it became a force for hegemony and homogeneity. All of us were losing our freedom. We all saw and learned that during the pandemic. I would say, even if you hate Trump, you have to acknowledge that he's a brilliant bulwark against globalism, and that was the real threat that we face. But that's just what I think. Let me know what you think in the comments and chat. Tell me, should Zelensky just come out and apologize? Say, look, I'm really sorry. I'm sorry about that. I overreacted. I got carried away. I thought that the power bestowed upon me by them globalist overlords was real. I didn't realize it was transitory. And with the machinations and tectonic shift in American politics, everyone's going to have to reconfigure. We could yet see the collapse of NATO, but also, terrifyingly, we could see the UK joining forces with the Ukraine in a global war against Russia when America are looking to broker a peace deal. That sounds crazier than anything you're likely to hear on independent media, even with Tate appearing on PBD. We're going to be covering that, as well as Musk on Rogan and so much more. Here is a quick message first from one of our partners. The IRS is the largest collection agency in the world, and with April 15th fast approaching, it's more aggressive than ever. In 2025, enforcement has ramped up, and if you owe back taxes or have unfiled returns, waiting is not an option. The longer you do, the worse it gets. Ignoring your tax troubles is the worst thing you can do. Getting ahead of this now is the smart move, but never contact the IRS alone. Let the experts at Tax Network USA handle it for you. Why? Because not all tax resolution companies are the same. Tax Network USA has a preferred direct line to the IRS, meaning they know exactly which agents to deal with and which ones to avoid. Tax Network USA have done the thinking for you. Don't just start ringing them up. You could get a right dick on the end of the line. With proven strategies to settle tax problems in your favor, whether you owe 10 grand or $10 million, Tax Network USA's agents and negotiators have already resolved over $1 billion in tax debt. Talk with one of their strategists today. It's free. Stop the threatening letters, stop looking over your shoulder, and protect yourself from property seizures and bank levies. Don't let the IRS control your future. Call 1-800-958-1000 or visit tnusa.com/brand. April the 15th is just around the corner. Act now before the IRS acts first. Where's the Epstein lists? Where are they? Where are they? Let me know in the comments and chat if it's provoked some kind of doubt in you not to get these lists outright and straightforward. Let me know if it causes you to doubt this new political moment. Let me know if you're watching us on locals, like my friend Beth in Wonderland there, or Thomas Beard, or Lily Farmgirl. Let me know Captain Si on Rumble, and Stokon and Roxanne. Let me know what you guys think about this stuff. Well, let me know, Zypher2000. What we're going to cover right now is the Ukraine-Russia conflict from a European perspective. You would think, with Trump publicly saying that a new peace deal is going to be brokered and that it's going to take a matter of days, that European powers or former powers will be looking to get in line and back that peace deal. Surely a peace deal, whether it's Trump that comes up with it or Kamala Harris that comes up with it, is a good thing, right? I mean, all John Lennon said is give peace a chance, not give peace a chance as long as it's framed as being from a liberal perspective. No, surely we have to ultimately want war to end. Well, in the UK, Keir Starmer is ultimately saying he wants war to escalate, increasing UK defence spending at a time when my country is in disarray and despair. You talk to anyone there, they're disgusted with how the country is being run. They're desperately looking for an alternative, praying that some new conglomerate of former left-wing populists like Jeremy Corbyn and right-wing vanguardians and Brexiteers like Farage will find a way to come together and work together against the bureaucrat, plutocrat class that Keir Starmer represents. What he's doing now is glorying in his post-Brexit ability to increase military expenditure. Now, let me know in the comments and chat what you think about that. With Trump talking about peace while Starmer's talking about war, who are the good guys really? And what right do the liberal elites have to condemn Trump when they were oh so happy to march into wars based on lies in Iraq? We'll be covering all of that. Let's have a look, first of all, at Keir Starmer saying that we have to really give war a chance.
The first priority of this government, of any government, is the security and safety of the British people, to defend the national interest, particularly in these volatile times.
I'd call that crap patriotism. That's crap patriotism. Stripped of its minerals, stripped of its stones, stripped of its balls, stripped of its meaning, but still trying to lean into the same sentiment. The first duty of any Prime Minister is to march people into an unwinnable war against a nuclear superpower. Britain, we believe in Britain where there are 9 genders, no, only 2 genders. We believe in Britain where we will never tax you, but we're going to have to tax you. We believe in Britain where these vaccines are good for you. Oh no, these vaccines may not have been good for you. What a lot of absolute nonsense. What kind of support does Keir Starmer have after the Southport murders? What kind of support does he have after the migrant crisis unfolding and creeping across the United Kingdom? What kind of moral basis does he have to make these kind of craply, jingoistic productions, trying to lean into some sentiment about Britain? If he met an actual British person, he'd condemn and hate them, because I'll tell you now, and I'll tell you true, they hate working class people. It don't matter how many tools their parents made. His dad used to be a tool maker. If you're American, you won't know that or care.
That's why last week I announced the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the Cold War.
That's not good news. That's not good news. If you are a liberal, globalist leader who takes money from elite classes, that is not good news. We're going to spend more money. This is good. What you've got is a neutralised and castrated leader marching into war against Putin, who goes about on horseback, near naked, and could probably kill you with the tip of his dick. But I did do an AIDS test recently, and all clear, all clear.
Since the Cold War. That's also why I met President Trump last week.
Met him. There I am. I got my folder. He's got his folder. We're just a couple of world leaders, really, bowling along. Have you done your AIDS test, Donald? Do you want me to do one for you?
Trump last week. To strengthen our relationship with America, and indispensable partners in defence and security. And it's why this weekend I've been hosting European leaders here in London to work together for the security of the United Kingdom.
See, it's just their own version of grandiosity and grandstand. That's why I've been with European leaders. Just because they're crap at it don't mean they're not trying to do it. Trump does well what they do badly. Joe Biden lost his temper with Zelensky. It was just boring when he did it. Keir Starmer is making propaganda videos telling you, there's no one as good as me, no one as smart as me. Beautiful deal, it's going to be very good. They're doing the same thing. It's just got no elan, no charm, no bombast. It just lacks the basic traits of leadership. So they can't condemn him from a position of class or moral superiority. It's just aesthetics.
Of the United Kingdom, Ukraine, and Europe as a whole. We are at a crossroads in history today. This is not a moment for more talk. It's
Why would you include the closing of the door in that video? I'll tell you what that reference is. That's from Godfather, when the door gets shut on Michael on Michael Corleone shuts the door on Kay, his wife, Diane Keaton, as if to suggest, oh, it's male power going on in here. This is where we do our gangster stuff. Now, in the context of The Godfather, perfectly legit. In the context of Keir Starmer, he ain't no Godfather. He ain't no Michael Corleone. This is a bureaucrat lawyer advocating for further war, potentially death of British kids and British, not just kids, adult professional soldiers. But nevertheless, you got to believe in that stuff. When people went to war in the late 30s and 40s, it's because they believed in fighting against Hitler and Nazism, even if some aspect of it was they were fighting for British imperial interests. They believed in ending the Holocaust and genocide as much as they knew about it at the point where Britain entered the war. They believed in protecting American interests when your country entered it after Pearl Harbor. Now, we don't have them kind of relationships with our country. Now, whatever Trump ain't doing, what he is doing is restoring that kind of connection to the land. That's one of the things actually that scares people about patriotism, is that it vivifies and libidinizes people. What Starmer is doing is trying to simultaneously de-libidinize, de-amplify British people and their sense of power and potency, while still posturing and grandstanding like he's a don. Now, they condemn someone like Andrew Tate as crass and vulgar and chauvinistic, but what does it mean when you post a video with a door being closed, or I was meeting with European leaders earlier this week, here I am marching down a corridor with Donald Trump, I'm as good as him, I show him my winky woo, he showed me his, I pulled my skin back, I got nothing to be ashamed of. Like, they can't 1 minute say this guy is vulgar, then use the tropes and takes that Trump would use. I've been meeting with leaders, this is business time, I'm shutting the door. They're just bad at it.
More talk. It's time to act, time to step up and lead, and to unite around a new plan for a just and enduring peace.
What a lot of propagandist filth. Filthy, stinking propaganda. This is a British journalist called Matt Kennard. He's very much of the left. He's responding here to Alistair Campbell, who was like a darling of Blair, when Blair, the leader of my country, the UK, went to war with George W. Bush, the then Republican leader of your country, for the false and erroneous Iraq War, which was a war that was about, many of us believed at the time, resources. It was one of the moments where, as a result of 9/11, many of us started to think, whose side are we on? What are we meant to believe in now? Can we trust our governments? Do our governments see their domestic populations as their primary enemy that have to be controlled, using war as a distraction, relying on our patriotism through jingoistic means in order to facilitate their own ends and advances? Well, let me know what you think about that in the comments and chat. Anyway, the brilliant journalist Matt Kennard posted this in response, I believe, to Alistair Campbell's claim that that sort of Trump was a danger to world peace and that we should all get behind Keir Starmer. Let's read it. Alistair Campbell and his boss Tony Blair increased UK weapons export licenses to Putin by 550% as he destroyed Chechnya and made Grozny the most destroyed city on earth. We are not going to apologise for developing a good relationship with an important world leader, Campbell said after inviting Putin to London in the year 2000. Interesting. We're not going to apologise for developing a good relationship with an important world leader. Now, think of how Trump is treated for his relationship with Putin. Remember, it's very difficult to have an objective assessment of reality when you have such corrupt media, such unreliable and deceptive media. How did they report on this at the time? Were they saying, Putin's a monster, he's destroying Chechnya? Were they saying that, or were they not? Were they saying, oh, Blair, mate, Britpop, isn't it lovely? Blur the Oasis. The media are vacuous vessels that cannot be relied upon now like they couldn't be relied upon then. You can only trust someone if they seem to have an absolute moral perspective that they maintain even when it's costly for them. For example, if during the pandemic people are like, whoa, I don't trust these motherfuckers, then you can probably rely on them some. The following year, Russian investigative journalist Anna Politiventskaya was in London and went to an event in London in the London Press Club, which Blair and Campbell attended. Politiventskaya, who was publishing groundbreaking work on Russian atrocities in Chechnya, used the opportunity to question Blair as he sat at his table with Campbell. The response of the Prime Minister of Great Britain to my inquiry regarding the nature of his affection for Putin was brief but comprehensive, she wrote. He replied, it's my job as Prime Minister to like Putin. And that was that. What more was there to be said? Polivotsky was later murdered in a contract-style killing in 2006. Putin is believed to have ordered the hit. The wooing of Putin was about securing business for BP, or Blair Petroleum, as it was then known. So, the business of politics has always been business. Trump is overt about it. Starmer is insidious about it. Zelensky don't know which strings to respond to because it's confusing for a puppet when the hands that pull the strings change. Minute ago, it was globalism in the form of Biden. Now it's a kind of nativism, America first, in the form of Trump. That dude don't know which way's up. But any moral claim to condemn Trump is ridiculous and dubious because it ain't undergirded by any real spiritual principles. It's undergirded by expedience. Globalist profiteers want control of Ukraine and the sets of interests that accrue around it. Your BlackRocks, your IMFs, your World Banks, them that will make loans as long as you spend money now and spend money here, those guys want their dudes in charge. It's as simple as that. Trump is, as always, creating havoc on behalf of the American people that elected him. That's what seems to be happening. But that's just what I think. Why don't you let me know what you think in the comments and chat. If you're watching this on X or YouTube or anywhere other than Rumble, click the link in the description now and join us over on Rumble. There's so much more to discuss. Where's them Epstein lists? I want to know who the clients were. Many are saying Bill Gates, client. Many are saying Bill Clinton, client. Let me know in the comments and chat who you think's going to be on those lists. Who are those people that were going to those parties, and why can't we get the proper reporting on it? What is the power behind Epstein? What is the power that means that legacy media aren't asking the right questions? Join us over on Rumble Premium right now. We'll be covering that as well as Musk's appearance on Joe Rogan. See you over there in a few seconds. You guys that are with us still, remember that if you are a Rumble Premium holder, I'll be on Rumble Premium in a matter of minutes. We've got 2 more brilliant stories to cover, the ones I've just listed. You will